All right, we're here with Mitch Pryor of MAP. Those are his initials. He's up in Portland, Oregon. And Mitch, it looks like the bikes you brought to the show today, more of a city randonneuring focus?
Yeah, yep.
And that's what your, would you consider that your niche, what you do?
City bikes, yeah, randonneur bikes and touring bikes.
Okay.
Just, that's the kind of riding I do, so it's the kind of bikes that I've been building.
Okay. These are really beautiful. I mean, they look like they just, stepped into the modern world from 30 years ago. Tell us about some of these bikes that you've brought to the show today.
Well, as you mentioned, some of them feature some older parts on them. I like to kind of combine old and new elements on each bike that I make. So if I can take from the past the best parts of what I feel are aesthetically pleasing and work for the kind of bike that it's going to be, and add new technology where I can, then I feel like I've kind of made a modern classic in essence, and that's what I try to do with each bike.
Now with this bike, give us an example of where you've combined some of the best of the older components with some of the more modern aspects of city bike.
Well, the front hub and light are both modern LED lighting system from Schmidt, German company, and both probably is the best dyno hub you can get in terms of rolling resistance these days, and best light output that you can get in terms of brightness, all that kind of stuff. Combine that with something like the real traditional handlebar bag and deck allure setup for holding your day, whatever's going to go with you on your day's trip. And maybe something like the TA crank that has a real elegance to it, but can take probably the greatest variety of chain rings that you can imagine. And I think that's kind of what I'm doing. In terms of combining old and new.
These fenders, are these your fenders?
No, those are a Velo orange fender.
Okay.
But otherwise too, like the lugs on this bike are old stock. They're old Prugnot French lugs that have been worked over quite a bit and refined and kind of brought up to date a little bit. So even sometimes I'll use old componentry and old tube components, things actually for constructing the frame that are vintage. So it depends on the build and what's the ultimate end goal. But
there's this black bike down here. Let's take a look at this bike. Now you've got some hand hammered fenders, it looks like, and some old Mayfac low profile cantilevers.
The fenders are actually no longer made anymore. They were pulled off an old French bike. They're LaFoil fenders, and happen to fit this rather large 650B tire that's been reintroduced into the market by Grambois, and which goes great with a city bike kind of a thing. Great plush ride, and so almost all of the componentry on this bike is old stock. Simplex retro friction shifters and Hooray Jubilee.
Very French. Very French.
I mean, it's like the owner of this bike had a Toei, which was a French, in essence, copy as well. And this is kind of a replacement for that Toei. Fit him a little better. So.
And this is a fillet brazed, looks like, frame?
Fillet brazed frame. Fillet brazed custom stem, and I made the rack as well with detachable lowriders, and brought it a little bit more up to date in terms of lighting with the Schmidt generator hub and Supernova light in this case.
Now, if a customer were to buy a bike from you, would included in the purchase price, would they get all these old stock components?
No, usually when I build with old stock components, I have either the customer bring them to the table, and fill in the blanks where I can, because a lot of this stuff is just not found very easily anymore. A lot of the people I've been building for are somewhat kind of collectors to begin with, and have some of these items. And if they're, if it all kind of lends to the overall goal of the bike, and I think it'll work well in the build, then I don't mind building around them. So.
Now, are most of these bikes 650B wheeled bikes, or do you?
These ones all are, but I don't just exclusively build around that wheel size.
Let's take a look at that white one. This is really beautiful. Now you've got, what kind of components are on this? It looks like you've got a single ring in the front with an old campy derailleur in the back.
It's and the crank itself too is a steel collarless campy crank with a custom chainring that the owner had made.
Wow, cool.
It's got an old Simplex chain guide, which is probably the only one I've ever seen that I made a braze on for it to attach to the brake.
That's really cool.
And old Mayfac Tiger brakes, which are made to clear 650B width tires and fenders, and
they feel great too. I mean, it's amazing, you know, a brake this old can feel this nice.
Yeah, and I mean, some weird things about this brake is like it's got no pad height adjustment. It's got a ball socket for the brake, so it's like some critical placement of the canny bosses or the center pull bosses for things like that. But yeah.
So you build, I mean, you would build a frame like this. Basically, the customer would bring you the parts because, I mean, this is, I mean, these Brazons, these are for this brake, right? I mean, it's not like you would just have this laying around the shop and you just bolt a Mayfac U-brake on it, right?
Usually I have to fabricate bosses for those kinds of brakes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, this bike, he brought probably 95% of the parts to me, and I filled in the blanks with like a fill bottom bracket and the wheel materials and the light, and built everything else from scratch. So
beautiful. Well,
thanks.
If you're looking for a custom city randonneuring bike where maybe you have a pile of old stock components
Don't say junk.
Not junk. No. Definitely not. None of this stuff is junk, obviously. I mean, some of these bikes are some of the most beautiful bikes we've seen here, and they are very functional. Mitch Pryor, MAP. He's up in Portland, Oregon. Thanks a lot, Mitch. Appreciate it.